You've done nothing for me, Audrey.
You'll regret this.
You are now the sole beneficiary.
Then let's begin.
Miss Whitmore Brooks is the controlling owner of Ashford Industrial Holdings.
No, that's not possible.
You asked for closure.
Nathan Brooks stood at the front door with the divorce papers in one hand and Audrey Whitmore Brooks's suitcase in the other. He told her she had contributed nothing to his life, then set her bag outside, as if 8 years of marriage could be reduced to a few folded clothes. Nathan believed he was forcing out a powerless woman. He did not know that a law firm had spent the entire morning trying to reach Audrey about a private inheritance tied to one of America's largest industrial fortunes. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional dramas and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 6 weeks earlier, the distance between them had still been hidden behind ordinary routines. Audrey woke before Nathan every morning in their modest house outside Stamford, Connecticut. She made coffee, reviewed household bills, and left early for her administrative job at a community health foundation. Nathan rarely asked what she did there. As far as he was concerned, her work was small, safe, and forgettable. His career had begun moving in the opposite direction. He had recently been promoted to senior account director at a growing marketing firm in Manhattan. The title came with better clothes, expensive dinners, and new people who spoke about money as if it were proof of character. Sabrina Cole was one of those people. She worked on Nathan's largest client account. She was polished, ambitious, and always impressed by whatever Nathan said. At first, he called their late dinners professional. Then he stopped explaining them at all. Audrey noticed the changes, the new password on his phone, the unfamiliar perfume on his jacket, or the way he looked through her when she spoke about anything that did not involve his career. She had not confronted him yet because Margaret Ashford, the grandmother who had raised her, had died less than 2 months earlier. Audrey was still sorting through grief, paperwork, and the practical details Margaret had left behind. There were boxes in storage, unopened mail, and several calls from unfamiliar numbers she had ignored, because she did not have the strength to speak to another attorney about another final document. Nathan treated her grief like an inconvenience. "You've been distracted for months," he told her one evening. "I need a partner who understands where my life is going." Audrey looked across the dinner table at the man she had once trusted completely. "And where is it going?" Nathan leaned back, irritated by the question. Forward, the answer hurt more than she expected. Audrey had never told Nathan everything about Margaret. She had said her grandmother once came from a wealthy family, but that the family business had been broken apart decades ago. That was what Audrey herself believed. Margaret had lived quietly in Greenwich, in a comfortable but unremarkable house, and had avoided every question about the Ashford name. Audrey respected that silence. She also carried her own reasons for keeping the past private. She had seen how quickly people changed when they believed money was nearby. She wanted a marriage in which she was valued without a family name, a trust account, or a promise of status. Nathan had once seemed to want the same thing. Now he mocked the very simplicity he had claimed to love. 3 nights later, Audrey came home early and found Sabrina sitting at her kitchen island with a glass of wine. Nathan stood beside her, one hand resting too comfortably against the back of Sabrina's chair. No one spoke at first. Sabrina was the one who finally smiled. "Nathan said you usually work late on Thursdays." Audrey set down her bag. "Apparently, Nathan says many things." Nathan's expression hardened. He did not apologize. He did not ask Sabrina to leave. Instead, he walked to the dining table and picked up a thick envelope. "I was going to wait until the weekend," he said, "but maybe this is better." He placed the papers in front of Audrey. A divorce petition had already been prepared. Her name was printed beneath his. Their marriage reduced to numbered paragraphs, property disclosures, and instructions from an attorney she had never heard of. Audrey read the first page twice. Her hands remained steady. Sabrina crossed her legs and watched her with open satisfaction. Nathan seemed angered by Audrey's silence. "You can keep your personal belongings. I'll cover a hotel for 2 nights. After that, you'll need to figure something out." "This is my home, too," Audrey said. "The mortgage is in my name. The payments came from our joint account." Nathan looked away for half a second. It was enough. Audrey understood then that this had been planned for longer than he would admit. She did not beg. She did not raise her voice. She walked upstairs, packed one suitcase, and placed her wedding ring on the bedroom dresser. When she returned, Nathan was checking his phone. Sabrina had moved closer to him. Audrey lifted the suitcase herself. At the doorway, Nathan held out the divorce papers. "You should sign quickly," he said. "Dragging this out won't improve your position." Audrey took the envelope and met his eyes. "You may be right about one thing," she said quietly. "Dragging this out won't change what you chose to become." Then she walked outside. Her phone vibrated inside her coat, but she did not stop to check it. Across town, a senior case manager at Kensington and Pierce Law Group stared at a screen, 6 unanswered calls, 3 returned letters, and a time-sensitive estate file marked confidential. He picked up the phone and called William Kensington directly. "We still haven't reached Audrey Whitmore Brooks," he said. "At this point, I think we need to locate her in person." On his desk lay a sealed document bearing the name Ashford Family Trust. Audrey did not look back at the house. She walked to the end of the block with the suitcase rolling behind her, each small wheel catching in the cracks of the sidewalk. The evening air had turned sharp, but she barely noticed. Her mind was still inside that dining room, fixed on the divorce papers, Sabrina's satisfied smile, and the cold certainty in Nathan's voice when he told her she had no claim to the life they had built together. At the corner, Audrey stopped beneath a streetlight and finally checked her phone. 7 missed calls. 3 were from an unfamiliar New York number. 2 were from the same Connecticut number that had appeared earlier that week. Another had left a voicemail marked urgent. Audrey almost deleted them. Since Margaret's death, she had received calls from estate clerks, insurance representatives, storage companies, and people who seemed to believe grief made a person available at any hour. She had answered enough questions about documents and death certificates to last a lifetime. Then she noticed the most recent voicemail had arrived less than 10 minutes earlier. She pressed play. A calm male voice identified himself as Daniel Price from Kensington and Pierce Law Group. He said the firm represented matters connected to the estate of Margaret Ashford. He asked Audrey to return the call immediately and stressed that the issue was confidential and time-sensitive. Audrey closed her eyes. Not tonight. She could not discuss her grandmother's estate while standing on a sidewalk with nowhere permanent to sleep. She saved the number, then opened a rideshare app and booked the cheapest room she could find near downtown Stamford. Her bank balance made her stomach tighten. Nathan had always earned more, but Audrey had paid her share of the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and insurance from the joint account. She had assumed the account would remain accessible until attorneys sorted out the separation. Now when she checked, the available balance was far lower than it had been 2 days earlier, not empty, but close. She took screenshots of the balance, recent transfers, and account history before Nathan could change anything else. Then she downloaded the statements to a private email address he did not know about. It was a small act. It was also the first decision she had made that evening for herself. The hotel room was narrow and plain, with a desk beneath the window and a heating unit that rattled every few minutes. Audrey placed her suitcase on the floor and set the divorce papers beside it. She did not read them again. Instead, she opened the voicemail list and listened to the message from Kensington and Pierce a second time. Margaret had never spoken warmly about lawyers. She had once said that powerful families used law firms the way ordinary people used locks. Not to show what they owned, but to decide who could reach it. Audrey had assumed it was one of her grandmother's old observations about a life she had left behind. Margaret's life in Greenwich had never looked extravagant. She owned a quiet home on a tree-lined street. She drove the same sedan for more than a decade. She wore expensive clothes only at formal charity events and refused to discuss where they came from. Her furniture was tasteful but old. Her habits were disciplined. She clipped coupons, argued over service fees, and knew the exact cost of everything she bought. Nathan had visited her fewer than a dozen times during the marriage. He always left impatient. He called Margaret severe, private, old-fashioned. What he really meant was that she had never been impressed by him. Audrey remembered one dinner 3 years earlier, when Nathan had spent nearly 20 minutes describing a marketing campaign he claimed had saved a major client. Margaret had listened without interruption, then asked him one question about ownership rights in the campaign data. Nathan had not known the answer. Margaret had changed the subject, but Audrey had seen the embarrassment in his face. Afterward, he accused Margaret of trying to make him feel small. Audrey had defended him then. She had told Margaret that Nathan was still learning, still building his career, still finding confidence. Margaret had looked at Audrey for a long moment. Confidence is not the same as character, she had said. Audrey had resented the remark at the time. Now it returned with painful clarity. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Nathan's name appeared. She stared at it until the call stopped. A message followed. "You left some things here. I'll box them up. Also, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sabrina is staying, so call before coming by." Audrey read the message twice. Then she took another screenshot. She did not answer. Across town, Nathan sat in the living room with Sabrina beside him, watching the screen for an indicator that never appeared. "She's trying to punish you with silence," Sabrina said. Nathan tossed the phone onto the couch. "That's what she does. She acts calm so everyone else feels guilty." Sabrina leaned against him. "Then stop giving her power. Change the locks tomorrow. Remove her from anything she doesn't need access to." Nathan hesitated. For the first time that night, he wondered whether Audrey's silence meant something other than weakness. The thought irritated him, so he pushed it away. At the hotel, Audrey called the Community Health Foundation and left a message for her supervisor. She said she needed one personal day. Then she opened a new folder on her laptop and labeled it Separation Records. She added the bank screenshots, Nathan's message, and a photograph of the divorce petition. Only after that did she call the law firm. The receptionist transferred her immediately. A man answered after one ring. "Ms. Whitmore Brooks?" "Yes." There was a pause. Not uncertainty, relief. "My name is Daniel Price. I'm a senior estate coordinator with Kensington and Pierce. We've been trying to reach you for several days. I'm sorry. My circumstances changed tonight, I understand. Before we discuss anything, we'll need to verify your identity and arrange an in-person meeting. This concerns your grandmother's estate, several trust instruments, and certain corporate interests." Audrey sat straighter. "Corporate interests?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "Your grandmother's affairs were more extensive than public records would suggest." Audrey looked toward the dark window. For years, Margaret had insisted that the Ashford world was gone. Finished, better left buried. What exactly did she leave behind, Audrey asked. "I'm not authorized to explain the scope by phone," Daniel said, "but Mr. Kensington believes the matter requires your immediate attention. He has cleared his schedule for tomorrow morning." Audrey glanced at the divorce papers on the desk. Nathan believed she had walked out with nothing. She was beginning to suspect Margaret had left her with something neither of them had ever understood. Daniel lowered his voice before continuing. "There is one more issue, Miss Whitmore Brooks. A sealed instruction in the Ashford Family Trust became active after your grandmother's death. Your signature is now required before several trustees can proceed." Audrey's fingers tightened around the phone. "What happens if I don't sign?" "Until you do," he said. "A very large part of the Ashford estate remains frozen." Audrey arrived at Kensington and Pierce Law Group the next morning 10 minutes early, dressed in the same clothes she had worn the night before. She had tied her hair back, straightened her posture, and forced herself into a version of composure she did not fully feel yet. The building itself was quiet and understated. No flashy signage, no unnecessary display. Just glass, steel, and a discreet name etched beside the entrance. The kind of place that did not need to prove anything. A receptionist greeted her by name before she even introduced herself. "Miss Whitmore Brooks, Mr. Kensington is expecting you." That small detail made Audrey pause. She followed the receptionist down a long hallway lined with conference rooms. Inside one of them, she caught a glimpse of 3 men in suits standing around a table covered with documents. One of them glanced up as she passed, then quickly looked away as if he had seen something he should not have. The receptionist stopped at a closed door and knocked once. "Mr. Kensington, Ms. Whitmore Brooks is here. Send her in." William Kensington stood as Audrey entered. He was older than she expected, with silver hair and the kind of stillness that came from years of making decisions that carried consequences. "Ms. Whitmore Brooks," he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Audrey shook it. His grip was firm, respectful. Please, he said, gesturing toward a chair across from his desk. I know this is not an easy time for you. Audrey sat, placing her bag beside her feet. You said this was urgent. Or it is. He did not rush into it. Instead, he opened a folder and slid a document across the desk. We'll begin with identity verification, standard procedure. Audrey reviewed the form, signed where indicated, and handed it back without hesitation. Her handwriting remained steady. Kensington studied her for a moment, as if measuring something beyond the paperwork. Your grandmother, Margaret Ashford, was a very private woman, he said. She preferred it that way. Yes, and she structured her affairs to ensure that privacy continued even after her death. He opened a second folder, thicker this time. Miss Whitmore Brooks, your grandmother was the controlling beneficiary of a multi-layered trust structure known as the Ashford Family Trust. This trust holds a diversified portfolio of assets, including controlling shares in Ashford Industrial Holdings and several subsidiary entities. Audrey listened without interrupting. The trust was designed to remain largely invisible, Kensington continued. No public filings directly connect it to the Ashford name in its current form. Ownership is distributed through intermediary entities, managed by appointed trustees. He paused, watching her reaction. There is one critical clause, he added. The trust transfers full beneficiary control only upon the death of the previous holder and the successful verification of the successor. Audrey's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. And that successor, Kensington said, is you. The room seemed to narrow, not because Audrey did not understand the words, but because she understood them too clearly. I thought she had stepped away from all of that, Audrey said quietly. She stepped away from public visibility, Kensington corrected. Not from ownership. He turned the document toward her. Preliminary valuation places the total asset base at approximately $1.2 billion. That includes equity holdings, real estate, and long-term investment instruments. The figure may adjust after final audits. Audrey did not react immediately. She stared at the number, then looked up. I didn't know I believed that, Kensington said. He closed the folder with deliberate care. Your grandmother was very specific about that. She did not want you influenced by the knowledge of this inheritance while building your personal life. Audrey almost laughed at the timing. That worked out well, she said. Kensington did not respond to the irony. There are conditions attached, he continued. You are not required to assume any active role in the management of Ashford Industrial Holdings. However, as the primary beneficiary, you will hold ultimate voting authority on major decisions. I don't have experience running a corporation of that size. You have more experience than you think, he said calmly, and you will have advisors. The structure exists to support you, not replace you. Audrey leaned back slightly. Her mind moved in two directions at once. One part of her was still standing in that doorway, holding a suitcase while Nathan told her she had nothing. The other part was sitting in this office, being told she controlled something far larger than she had ever imagined. She chose not to react to either. What do you need from me right now? She asked. Kensington nodded once, as if he had expected that question. There are several documents requiring your signature to activate full beneficiary access. Until those are completed, a significant portion of the trust remains in a restricted state. Transactions above certain thresholds cannot proceed. So everything is paused. Not everything, he said, but enough to matter. Audrey considered that. Then we should review everything carefully before I sign anything. Kensington allowed himself a small approving expression. That is exactly what your grandmother would have said. He stood and walked to the window, then turned back. There is one more matter you should be aware of. Some of the entities connected to Ashford Industrial Holdings maintain ongoing contracts with external firms. Marketing, consulting, logistics. If control shifts formally, those relationships may be reviewed. Audrey's thoughts flickered. Nathan's firm, his largest client. She did not speak the connection out loud. Not yet. Kensington returned to his desk. I would also recommend that you do not disclose this information publicly until we complete the legal transition, he said. Premature exposure could complicate both the trust structure and your personal situation. Audrey met his gaze. My personal situation is already complicated, I imagine it is. She exhaled slowly. I'm in the middle of a divorce, she said. He believes I have nothing. Kensington did not react with surprise, only calculation. Then it is even important that we proceed carefully. Audrey nodded. For the first time since the night before, she felt something solid beneath her. Not relief, not satisfaction, control. I want copies of everything, she said. Digital and physical. You'll have them within the hour, and I want to understand exactly which entities I have authority over before any decisions are made. You will, he said. Audrey stood. As she reached for her bag, Kensington added one final detail. There is a board review scheduled in 10 days. Several trustees have delayed key decisions pending your confirmation. They are waiting. Audrey paused at the door. Then they'll have it, she said. Outside the office, the same 3 men in suits stood as she passed again. This time, one of them nodded to her, not casually, respectfully. Audrey did not acknowledge it, but she noticed. Back at the hotel, she opened her laptop and began reading through the first set of documents Kensington had sent. Entity structures, ownership layers, voting thresholds. Then she saw a familiar name, the largest active client under one of Ashford Global Holdings' subsidiaries. The same company that accounted for nearly half of Nathan's firm's revenue. Audrey leaned back in her chair, the screen glowing in front of her. Nathan still believed she had walked away with nothing. He had no idea how close he already was to losing everything he thought he had built, and for the first time, Audrey did not feel small when she thought about him. She felt prepared. Nathan Brooks did not sleep well that night. He lay awake beside Sabrina, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in his head. Audrey's calm voice, the way she had not argued, the way she had not begged. It unsettled him more than anger would have. By morning, he convinced himself it meant nothing. She had always been quiet, always withdrawn when things became difficult. That was part of the problem. He got out of bed early, leaving Sabrina asleep, and went downstairs to make coffee. The house felt different without Audrey's presence. Too quiet, but also lighter in a way he refused to examine too closely. As the machine hummed, his eyes landed on the kitchen counter. A stack of unopened mail sat near the edge, exactly where Audrey had left it days ago. Bills, catalogs, and one envelope with the law firm's return address, Kensington and Pierce Law Group. Nathan frowned and picked it up. The name stirred something faint in his memory, but he could not place it. He turned the envelope over. It was addressed to Audrey Whitmore Brooks. He hesitated for only a second before opening it. The letter inside was brief and formal. It referenced Margaret Ashford's estate. It instructed Audrey to contact the firm immediately. It mentioned time-sensitive matters and pending legal actions tied to asset distribution. Nathan read it twice, then a third time. His pulse began to quicken. Margaret Ashford had never seemed wealthy. Audrey had never acted like someone connected to anything significant. No designer habits, no hidden accounts, no signs of money beyond what they had built together. So why would a firm like this be involved? Nathan pulled out his phone and searched the name. Kensington and Pierce Law Group. The results came up immediately. Corporate law, private wealth, estate management for high net worth clients. High net worth. Nathan scrolled further. Then he searched Margaret Ashford. At first, nothing useful. Obituaries, condolence pages, basic records. Then, buried deeper older references began to surface. Ashford Industrial Holdings. The name appeared in financial articles, merger summaries, and corporate filings stretching back decades. He tapped one of the links. The article was old, but detailed enough. Margaret Ashford had once been listed among the primary beneficiaries of a privately held industrial group, not publicly traded, not widely discussed, but large, very large. Nathan leaned against the counter, his mind began to move faster. If even a fraction of that was still intact, he stopped himself. No, Audrey would have said something, wouldn't she? But then another thought pushed through. She had not said anything about the letter either, and she had left it unopened. Nathan looked back at the envelope in his hand. A sudden, uncomfortable realization settled in. Audrey might not know. The idea shifted everything. He had forced her out of the house, filed for divorce, cut her off from their joint account. Let Sabrina humiliate her, and if this letter meant what he thought it might, he exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. Upstairs, Sabrina stirred. He heard her footsteps a moment later as she descended the stairs, still wrapped in one of his shirts. "You're up early," she said, stretching as she entered the kitchen. Nathan folded the letter quickly and set it face down on the counter. Couldn't sleep. She poured herself coffee without asking and leaned against the counter across from him. "Still thinking about her?" she asked lightly. Nathan forced a small smile. "No." Sabrina watched him for a moment, then shrugged. "Good, because we have better things to think about." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling. "I checked the Riverside venue again. If we book it for 6 weeks from now, we can still get the evening slot. It's expensive, but it's perfect." Nathan barely heard her. His attention kept drifting back to the letter, to the possibility it represented. 6 weeks? He said absently. "Yeah, why wait? You already filed. There's no reason to drag this out." Nathan nodded slowly. "No reason, except there might be." He picked up his phone again and searched Ashford Industrial Holdings once more. This time he looked deeper. Ownership structures, parent companies, subsidiaries. The information was fragmented, but a pattern began to form. This was not a small inheritance. It was something layered, hidden, structured to avoid attention. Exactly the kind of thing Audrey would never have talked about. Sabrina stepped closer, slipping her arms around his waist. "Hey," she said softly, "you're not seriously second-guessing this, are you?" Nathan looked at her. She was everything Audrey was not. Confident, sharp, focused on growth, not comfort. "That's not it," he said. "Then what?" He hesitated, then he shook his head. "Nothing important." Sabrina smiled, satisfied with that answer, and kissed him lightly. "Good, because we're building something better." Nathan watched her walk back toward the living room, already talking about flowers and guest lists. Better. He glanced at the letter again. If Audrey had just walked away from something worth real money, he felt a sharp twist in his chest. Not guilt, something closer to panic. He grabbed his phone and dialed the number printed at the bottom of the letter. The call connected quickly. "Kensington and Pierce Law Group. How may I direct your call?" "Yes," Nathan said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "I'm calling about a letter sent to Audrey Whitmore Brooks. This is her husband, well, soon-to-be ex-husband." There was a brief pause. "Sir, I'm afraid we can only discuss client matters directly with Miss Whitmore Brooks." "I understand," Nathan said quickly. "I just need to confirm something. Is this about a financial inheritance? I'm not authorized to disclose that information. Even generally, I'm sorry, sir." The line went quiet for a second. Then the receptionist added, "If Miss Whitmore Brooks has not yet contacted us, we strongly advise that she do so as soon as possible." The call ended. Nathan lowered the phone slowly. That was not a denial. Behind him, Sabrina called out from the living room. "Nathan, come look at this. The ballroom has floor-to-ceiling windows. It's incredible." He didn't move right away. Instead, he looked down at the letter one more time. Then he folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. For the first time since Audrey walked out, Nathan felt something he hadn't expected. Not relief, not freedom, fear. Because somewhere out there, the woman he had just discarded might be holding something he could no longer reach. And he had no idea how big it really was. Nathan's phone never left his hand the next few days. At the office, he pretended to focus on client reports, but his attention kept drifting back to the same thought. Audrey might be sitting on something valuable, something he had just walked away from without even asking the right questions. He refreshed his search results again, looking for anything new about Ashford Industrial Holdings. Most of what he found was layered behind corporate structures, private filings, or summarized in language that avoided clear numbers. That bothered him more than if the information had been obvious. People hid things when they mattered. Across the room, Sabrina laughed with one of the junior associates, her voice light, confident, untouched by doubt. She had already started acting like this new life was guaranteed. Nathan stood up and walked toward her. "Hey," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Do you remember anything about Audrey's grandmother, Margaret Ashford?" Sabrina barely looked up from her phone. "The quiet one? Not really." "Why?" Nathan shrugged, just wondering if she left anything behind. Sabrina smirked. If she did, it wasn't enough to make Audrey interesting. The words landed harder than Nathan expected, not because he disagreed, but because he wasn't sure anymore. He forced a laugh and walked back to his desk. That evening, he stopped by the house earlier than usual. Sabrina wasn't there yet. The silence felt heavier this time. He went straight to the office room they had rarely used. Audrey had kept most of her personal documents there. Bills, old tax returns, insurance records. Nothing important, at least that was what he had always assumed. He pulled open drawers, flipping through folders faster than he needed to. Routine paperwork, utility statements, medical bills. Nothing that suggested wealth. Nothing that suggested control over anything beyond their shared expenses. Then he found a small envelope tucked between two folders. Not labeled, not addressed, just sealed. He hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page, a formal document printed on heavy paper bearing a name he recognized now. Ashford Family Ashford. His pulse spiked. The document was not detailed. It didn't list assets or numbers. It simply confirmed that Audrey Whitmore Brooks had been recorded as the contingent beneficiary under a trust structure pending verification and activation. Contingent pending activation. Nathan stared at the words. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't speculation. This was real. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Then he sat down, suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become. He thought about the moment Audrey had stood at the door with her suitcase. The way she had looked at him. Not desperate, not afraid. Just finished. He rubbed his hands together, trying to steady the rising tension in his chest. If Audrey didn't know yet, then there was still time. Time to fix it. Time to position himself differently. Time to not be the man who walked away from something like this. His phone buzzed. Sabrina, where are you? I found a wedding planner. You're going to love this, Nathan stared at the message. Wedding, 6 weeks. Commitment. Final. He typed back quickly. On my way. When he arrived, Sabrina was already waiting with brochures spread across the table. Venues, floral designs, guest lists. All of this, she said, tapping the pages, is going to be ours. We just need to move fast before someone else books the good dates. Nathan nodded, but his mind wasn't fully there. How much is all of this going to cost? He asked. Sabrina shrugged. Does it matter? You make good money, and honestly, we deserve it. Nathan thought about the joint account. What was left of it? He had already moved most of it into his personal account the morning he filed for divorce. It had felt like a practical decision at the time. Now it felt exposed, he said quietly. Sabrina frowned slightly. Since when do you care about that kind of thing? Nathan forced a smile. Since I started planning a future. She studied him for a moment, then leaned forward. You're overthinking. Audrey was holding you back. This, she gestured around the room. This is who you're supposed to be. Nathan nodded again, but something had shifted. Later that night, after Sabrina left, he sat alone in the living room and opened his phone. He pulled up Audrey's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button. If he reached out now, what would he say? I made a mistake? I didn't know. Come back, the words felt weak, transparent. He lowered the phone. No, he needed to be smarter than that. He needed to understand exactly what Audrey had before making any move. The next morning, he skipped his usual commute and drove straight to a different address. Kensington and Pierce Law Group. He parked across the street and watched the entrance for nearly 20 minutes. Executives came and went. Assistants, lawyers. People who moved with purpose. People who did not waste time. Nathan adjusted his jacket and stepped out of the car. If Audrey was connected to this place, then this was where the truth lived. Inside, the receptionist greeted him politely but without recognition. I'm here to ask about a client, Nathan said, trying to sound confident. Name? Audrey Whitmore Brooks. The receptionist's expression changed, just slightly professional, controlled. I'm sorry, sir, she said. We cannot disclose any information regarding our clients. Nathan leaned in a little. I'm her husband. Then you should speak with her directly. The answer was immediate, final. Nathan stepped back, forcing a polite nod. Of course. As he turned to leave, he caught a brief movement in the hallway behind her, a door opening. A figure stepping out, Audrey. She was dressed differently than he had ever seen her before. Not extravagant, not showy, but precise, composed. Like someone who understood exactly where she stood. She didn't see him, or if she did, she didn't react. A man walked beside her, older, controlled. The same kind of presence as the others in this building. William Kensington, Nathan froze. He watched as Audrey spoke to him quietly, nodding once as if confirming something important. Not asking, not uncertain, confirming. The receptionist stepped forward slightly, blocking Nathan's view as the two of them moved deeper into the building. Nathan stood there for a long second, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He had expected answers. Instead, he had seen something far worse. Audrey wasn't lost. She wasn't struggling. She was already inside a world he didn't understand, and she wasn't looking back. Nathan didn't sleep that night. The image of Audrey standing inside Kensington and Pierce Law Group replayed in his mind again and again. Not lost, not desperate, not the woman he had dismissed so easily. She had looked certain. That unsettled him more than anything. By morning, the anxiety had turned into something sharper. Urgency. He couldn't afford to wait anymore. At the office, he barely made it through the first hour before pulling up Audrey's number again. His thumb hovered for a long second before pressing call. It rang. Once, twice. Then went to voicemail. He ended the call immediately, jaw tightening. She was ignoring him. Of course she was. Across the desk, Sabrina glanced up from her laptop. "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep." Nathan forced a shrug. "Just work." Sabrina leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You've been off for days. If this is about Audrey, you need to let it go. She's not your problem anymore." Nathan didn't answer, because that was exactly the problem. He wasn't sure Audrey had ever been what he thought she was. That afternoon, Sabrina pushed harder. She walked into his office, dropped a folder onto his desk, and crossed her arms. "I booked the Grand Harbor Ballroom," she said. 6 weeks. Non-refundable deposit. Nathan blinked. "You what?" "It's perfect," she continued, ignoring his tone. "Prime location, waterfront view, top-tier service. This is the kind of wedding we deserve." Nathan opened the folder. The number printed at the bottom made his stomach tighten. That's a lot of money. Sabrina's expression sharpened. "So what?" "You've been talking about building a better life. This is part of it." Nathan closed the folder slowly. The irony pressed in on him. He had left Audrey because he thought she lacked ambition, because she didn't chase status the way Sabrina did. Now he was standing in the middle of a life that demanded more than he could comfortably give. And somewhere else, Audrey was stepping into something far bigger without saying a word. "I'll handle it," he said finally. Sabrina smiled, satisfied. "I knew you would." But Nathan wasn't thinking about the wedding anymore. He was thinking about timing. If Audrey's situation was real, if the trust was activating, then there would be paperwork, transfers, public filings eventually, which meant there was a window. A small one. That night he tried again. Another call, another voicemail. He didn't leave a message this time. Instead, he sent a text. "We need to talk. It's important." He stared at the screen for a long time. No response. Hours passed. Still nothing. The silence started to feel deliberate, not emotional, controlled, and that made it worse. The next morning, Nathan changed his approach. If Audrey wouldn't come to him, he would create a reason for her to respond. At lunch, he sat across from Sabrina at a quiet restaurant, pretending to be engaged while his mind worked through the idea. Then he said it. "We should invite Audrey to the wedding." Sabrina froze for a second, then her lips curled into a slow smile. "Really?" Nathan nodded, keeping his tone measured. "It's the right thing to do. Closure. No drama later." Sabrina leaned forward, clearly enjoying the thought. "Closure?" she repeated. Or do you just want her to see what she lost?" Nathan didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. Sabrina laughed softly. "I like it. Actually, I love it. Let her come. Let her see everything. The venue, the guests, the life she couldn't keep." Nathan forced a small smile. Exactly. Inside, his thoughts were colder. If Audrey showed up, he would have a chance to talk to her, to understand, to adjust, to fix whatever could still be fixed. Sabrina picked up her phone immediately. "Do you even have her contact info?" "I'll get it," Nathan said quickly. That part was easy. A mutual contact from the office still had Audrey's number. Someone who had always been neutral, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. By evening, Nathan had everything he needed. He sat alone in the living room again, the same place where Audrey had once spent quiet nights reading, the same place he had started replacing her presence with something louder, more temporary. He opened a new message. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He couldn't sound desperate. He couldn't mention money. He couldn't show that he had seen her at the law firm, so he wrote carefully. "Audrey, I know things ended badly, but I think we both deserve some closure. Sabrina and I are getting married in 6 weeks. I'd like to invite you. It would mean a lot if we could move forward without resentment." He read it twice, neutral, polite, controlled. He sent it. Then he waited. The minutes stretched 10, 20, an hour, nothing. Nathan leaned back, exhaling slowly. Maybe she wouldn't respond. Or maybe she was already too far removed from this version of her life. Maybe his phone buzzed. A message from Audrey. He sat up immediately and opened it. 3 words, "I'll be there." Nathan stared at the screen. No anger, no explanation, no hesitation, just certainty. He felt something tightened in his chest. Across the room, Sabrina walked in and caught the look on his face. "What?" she asked. Nathan turned the phone toward her. She said yes. Sabrina's eyes lit up instantly. "Oh, this is going to be perfect." She started talking immediately, already imagining the scene, the guests, the reactions. The moment Audrey would walk into a room full of people who had already chosen a side, Nathan barely heard her. Because something about Audrey's response didn't feel like surrender. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like a decision, a quiet one, and he had no idea what it meant. That night, long after Sabrina fell asleep, Nathan sat awake in the dark. He replayed the message again. "I'll be there. No emotion, no weakness, just control." For the first time since the divorce, Nathan felt something he hadn't expected. Not guilt, not regret, something closer to unease. Because whatever Audrey had become in those few weeks, she wasn't coming back to his world. She was wanking in on her own terms, and he had just invited her to do it in front of everyone. The morning of the wedding arrived with a brightness that felt almost artificial. Nathan stood in front of the mirror in the groom's suite at the Grand Harbor Ballroom, adjusting his tie for the third time. His reflection looked composed, polished, exactly what people expected, but his hands weren't steady. Outside, the venue buzzed with quiet luxury. Staff moved with precision. Floral arrangements were placed down to the inch, the kind of event that signaled success without needing to say it out loud. Sabrina had made sure of that. She appeared behind him in the mirror, already dressed, already perfect. Her gown caught the light in a way that demanded attention. She smiled, resting a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Relax," she said softly. "Today is about us." Nathan nodded, but his eyes drifted past her, to the doors, to the space where guests were beginning to arrive, to the one person he couldn't stop thinking about. Sabrina noticed. "She'll come," she said, almost amused. "Women like her don't walk away quietly. They need to see it." Nathan didn't respond, because he wasn't sure Audrey needed anything anymore. The ceremony was set for early afternoon. By noon, the ballroom had filled. Colleagues, family, clients. People who had watched Nathan's rise and were now here to celebrate the next chapter. The music played softly. Champagne flowed. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to, and yet Nathan couldn't focus on any of it. He stood at the front, waiting, exchanging small talk with guests, shaking hands, smiling when required. But every few seconds, his eyes flicked back to the entrance, waiting, watching. Sabrina moved through the room like she already owned it, laughing, greeting guests, soaking in the attention. This was her world, and for a long time Nathan had believed it would be his too. Then the doors opened. It wasn't dramatic at first. No announcement, no sudden silence, just a shift. A subtle change in the air as a few guests near the entrance turned, their expressions tightening with confusion. Nathan noticed the movement before he saw her, and when he did, everything else faded. Audrey Whitmore Brooks stepped into the ballroom. Not hurried, not hesitant, steady. She wore a simple tailored dress, not extravagant, but precise, every detail intentional. Her posture was straight, her expression calm, not defensive, not emotional, just controlled. For a moment, the room didn't know how to react, because this wasn't the version of Audrey anyone expected. Not the woman who had left with a suitcase. Not the woman they assumed had disappeared quietly. Nathan felt his chest tighten. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at him, and held it. There was no accusation in her gaze, no anger. That made it worse, because it meant she didn't need to prove anything. Sabrina followed Nathan's line of sight and turned. Her smile faltered for just a second. Then it came back, sharper. "Well," she said under her breath, "she actually came." Audrey began walking forward. The sound of her heels against the floor cut cleanly through the music, step by step, measured, unrushed. Guests shifted slightly as she passed, instinctively making space. Nathan watched every movement, trying to read something, anything. But Audrey gave him nothing. She stopped a few feet away, close enough for a conversation. Far enough to make it clear she wasn't part of what was happening here. Nathan cleared his throat. "Audrey, I'm glad you came." The words sounded weak even to him. Audrey tilted her head slightly, as if considering whether the statement deserved a response. "I said I would," she replied. Her voice was steady, quiet, but it carried. Sabrina stepped forward, inserting herself between them with practiced ease. "We wanted you here," she said, her tone smooth but edged. "Closure is important." Audrey looked at her then. Not with hostility, not with insecurity, Just a brief, assessing glance. As long as everyone understands what that means, Audrey said. Sabrina smiled wider. Oh, I think we do. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. The conversation wasn't going the way he imagined. There was no tension he could control, no emotional reaction he could manage. Audrey wasn't reacting. She was observing. That difference unsettled him more than anything. Can we talk? Nathan said, lowering his voice slightly. Audrey met his gaze again. For a moment, she said. They stepped aside, away from the immediate circle of guests, not private, but quieter. Nathan exhaled slowly. I didn't expect things to end like they did. Audrey didn't respond. He continued, filling the silence. I think we both made mistakes. Still nothing. Her silence forced him forward. I want to make sure there's no bad blood between us. Audrey's expression didn't change. No bad blood, she repeated softly. Then she gave a small nod, as if acknowledging something only she fully understood. That's a useful phrase, she said. Nathan frowned slightly. What do you mean? Audrey glanced briefly around the room. At the guests, at the space, at the carefully constructed image of a life that had replaced her. Then she looked back at him. It means different things depending on who's saying it, she said. Before Nathan could respond, a man approached, older, impeccably dressed, professional. Nathan recognized him immediately. William Kensington, the same man Audrey had meeting at the law firm. He stopped beside her, not intruding but clearly aligned. Miss Whitmore, he said quietly. Everything is ready. Nathan's breath caught. Everything. Ready for what? Audrey gave a small nod. Thank you, she said. William stepped back, remaining nearby but out of the immediate conversation. Nathan looked between them, confusion sharpening into something else, something closer to alarm. What's going on? He asked. Audrey didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned slightly, looking toward the center of the ballroom where the ceremony was about to begin. Guests were taking their seats. The music was shifting. Everything was moving forward, right on schedule. She took a slow breath, then looked back at Nathan. You wanted closure, she said. Nathan felt his pulse rise. Yes, Audrey held his gaze for one long second. Then let's make sure you get it. And before he could ask another question, before he could stop her, Audrey stepped away from him and began walking toward the center of the room, not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but like someone who had already decided exactly how this moment would unfold. Nathan stood frozen, watching her go. For the first time, the unease in his chest turned into something sharper. Because whatever Audrey was about to do, he had the sudden, undeniable feeling that this wedding was no longer under his control. Audrey reached the center of the ballroom just as the music began to shift for the ceremony. It didn't stop. That was the first thing people noticed. Nothing paused for her. No one announced her presence. The officiant was still preparing his notes. Guests were still settling into their seats. And yet attention moved. Slowly, inevitably, toward her. Nathan felt it from where he stood, the shift, like something subtle had tilted, and the room hadn't caught up yet. Sabrina stepped beside him again, her fingers tightening slightly around his arm. What is she doing? She whispered, irritation slipping through. Nathan didn't answer, because he didn't know. Audrey didn't rush. She stopped just short of the aisle, standing where the light from the tall windows caught her profile. For a moment, she simply looked around, not nervously, not with hesitation, but with recognition, as if she were memorizing the room, the people, the setting, as if this moment mattered, but not in the way anyone else assumed. William Kensington stepped forward again, stopping a respectful distance behind her. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His presence alone created a ripple of quiet confusion among the guests closest to them. A few recognized him, not personally but professionally. The kind of man people had seen in business journals, in legal announcements, or attached to deals that didn't make headlines until they were already done. Nathan felt his pulse pick up. This wasn't random. This wasn't emotional. This was deliberate. The officiant cleared his throat, uncertain. Should we give us a moment? Audrey said calmly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The officiant hesitated, then stepped back. And just like that, the ceremony paused. Not officially, but in reality, Sabrina's grip tightened. Excuse me, she snapped, stepping forward. This is our wedding. Audrey turned her head slightly, meeting her eyes again. I'm aware, she said. There was no apology in it, just acknowledgement. Sabrina laughed once, sharp. Then you should understand this isn't the place for whatever you think you're doing. Audrey held her gaze for a second longer. Then she looked past her. To Nathan. This won't take long, she said. Nathan swallowed. Audrey, but the words felt useless the moment they left his mouth, because she wasn't asking for permission. She reached into her bag and took out a single folder, simple, unmarked. She didn't open it yet, she just held it, and in that small, controlled motion, something shifted again. Guests leaned forward, not dramatically, but enough. Curiosity building, tension tightening. William stepped closer, speaking quietly enough that only those nearest could hear. Ms. Whitmore, he said, we can proceed whenever you are ready. Nathan's stomach dropped. Proceed? Proceed with what? He stepped forward instinctively. Audrey, what is this? For the first time, she looked directly at him again, and this time there was something different in her expression. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. You asked for closure, she said. Her tone remained even. I'm making sure it's complete. Sabrina scoffed. This is ridiculous. Nathan, tell her to leave. Nathan didn't move, because something inside him had already shifted from control to anticipation, from certainty to doubt, and doubt was louder. Audrey opened the folder, slowly, deliberately, but before she could take anything out, a staff member approached from the side, hesitating as if unsure whether to interrupt. Sir, the man said quietly to Nathan, there's an issue with the event authorization. Nathan blinked. What? The man glanced toward Audrey, then back. We were just informed that the booking contract requires confirmation from the property ownership group for final clearance. Sabrina frowned. That's not possible. We signed everything weeks ago. I understand, the man said carefully, but the ownership structure changed recently. The request came through this morning. Nathan felt something cold slide down his spine. Ownership changed? What does that mean? He asked. The staff member hesitated, then lowered his voice further. It means the venue is awaiting final approval before proceeding with the ceremony. Sabrina stepped forward sharply. From who? The man didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked just briefly toward Audrey. It was quick, subtle, but Nathan saw it. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. His breath caught. Audrey noticed, of course she did. She closed the folder again without taking anything out. Then she turned slightly, enough for both Nathan and Sabrina to see her clearly. This is why I said it wouldn't take long, she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. Sabrina's expression hardened. If you're trying to ruin this, I'm not trying to ruin anything, Audrey interrupted gently. She paused, then added, I'm just making sure everything is happening with the right authorization. Nathan felt his chest tighten. The words didn't sound threatening, but the implication was impossible to ignore. You're saying, he started, then stopped. Because he didn't even know how to finish the sentence. Audrey didn't help him. Instead, she turned to William. Has the request been processed? William gave a small nod. We're waiting on confirmation. It should arrive shortly. Nathan stared at him, then back at Audrey. Something clicked. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to make the ground beneath his certainty shift. You have something to do with this, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Audrey met his gaze. For a long moment, she said nothing, and that silence answered more than words could. Across the room, guests were whispering now. Confusion spreading, the perfect image of the wedding beginning to crack, not through chaos, but through uncertainty. Sabrina looked between them, frustration turning into something sharper. Nathan, this is insane. Whatever she's doing, we can fix it later. Tell them to continue. Nathan didn't move, because for the first time he wasn't sure he could. The staff member's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then looked up again. His expression changed. But enough, sir, he said, voice careful. We've received a response. Nathan's pulse spiked. The man swallowed, then said the one thing that made the entire room seem to tilt. The authorization has been placed on hold, pending direct approval from a controlling party connected to Ashford Global Holdings. Nathan's mind went blank for a second. Ashford. He knew that name now too well. Slowly, he turned his head, back to Audrey. And for the first time, the possibility he had been avoiding began to take shape. Not confirmed. Not yet, but close enough to feel real. Audrey didn't speak. She didn't need to, because the question was already forming in his mind. And the answer was standing right in front of him. And whatever that answer was, it was about to change everything. The word Ashford hung in the air like a fracture line no one could ignore. Nathan felt it settle into his chest, heavy and undeniable. The same name he had searched late at night, the same name tied to numbers he could barely comprehend. Now it was here, in this room, connected to Audrey. He looked at her again, but this time not as the woman he had dismissed, as something else, something he hadn't understood. Sabrina stepped forward sharply, her composure cracking for the first time. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice tight. "Whoever sent that message is confused. We signed a legal contract. You can't just stop a wedding because of some corporate technicality." The staff member hesitated. "Mom, I'm only relaying what we were told." "The ownership group." "I don't care about the ownership group," Sabrina snapped. "Fix it." Nathan barely heard her, because Audrey hadn't moved. She stood exactly where she had been, calm in the middle of rising tension, as if she had expected every second of this. William stepped forward again, his presence now impossible to ignore. He addressed the staff member directly. "Please inform your management that the authorization request should now be reviewed under the updated beneficiary directive." The staff member blinked. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand." William didn't raise his voice. "You don't need to. You only need to confirm that the request is routed correctly." Nathan's pulse spiked. Beneficiary directive. The words hit harder than anything else. He turned fully toward Audrey. "What is he talking about?" This time she didn't deflect. She met his eyes and held them. "For weeks," she said quietly, "you've been trying to figure out what you missed." Nathan swallowed. "Then tell me." There was a flicker of something in her expression. Not cruelty, not satisfaction, something steadier. "You didn't miss anything," she said. "You chose not to see it." Sabrina let out a short laugh, though it sounded strained. "Oh, please. Don't turn this into something dramatic. Whatever you think you've found, it doesn't change anything." Audrey turned her gaze to her again. "No," she said calmly. "It doesn't change what happened." She paused. "But it does change what happens next." The room had gone quieter now. Guests were no longer pretending this was a minor interruption. Phones were lowered. Conversations had stopped. People were watching, waiting. Nathan felt it all pressing in, but his focus stayed locked on Audrey. "What are you saying?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed the folder to William. He opened it with practiced ease, pulling out a set of documents. Not flashy, not theatrical, just paper. But the way he held them made it clear they mattered. "Mr. Brooks," William said, addressing Nathan directly for the first time, "these documents confirm that the Ashford Family Trust has completed its primary beneficiary transition." Nathan's breath caught. Primary beneficiary. He already knew where this was going. He just wasn't ready to hear it out loud. William continued, his tone steady, precise. "As of this morning, all controlling interests associated with Ashford Industrial Holdings and its subsidiary entities are under the authority of Ms. Audrey Whitmore Brooks." The words didn't echo. They landed, heavy, final. For a second, Nathan didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even think, because the version of reality he had been holding on to shattered all at once. Sabrina stepped forward again, shaking her head. "No, that's not. This is ridiculous. You're saying she just what? That doesn't stop a wedding." William didn't look at her. He kept his focus on Nathan. "It means," he said, "that any venue, contract, or corporate entity under Ashford Global Holdings requires her authorization for continued operation in circumstances such as this." Nathan felt his throat tighten. The staff member spoke again, more cautiously now. "Sir, the Grand Harbor Ballroom is listed under a hospitality group recently acquired by an Ashford subsidiary. We were informed the transfer finalized early this morning." Nathan turned slowly, back to Audrey. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice lower now. She didn't hesitate. Yes, one word. No emphasis, no performance. Just truth. Sabrina stared at her. "You're lying." Audrey didn't respond to that. She didn't need to, because the proof wasn't in her tone. It was in everything around them. The staff, the hesitation, the silence, the shift. Nathan took a step closer. "You knew," he said. "You knew before this." Audrey held his gaze. "I found out after I left," she said. "Not before. That hit differently." Because it meant he had thrown her out without even knowing what she was about to become. Without knowing what he was losing, he let out a breath that felt unsteady. "And you didn't say anything." Audrey's expression didn't change. "There was nothing to say," she replied. The simplicity of it cut deeper than anything else. Sabrina shook her head, backing up slightly. "This is insane, Nathan. We're not letting this ruin everything." "Tell them to continue." Nathan didn't answer. Because he finally understood something. This wasn't something he could fix. Not with words, not with authority, not anymore. Audrey stepped forward one last time, closing the distance just enough that her voice wouldn't carry beyond them. "I didn't come here to take anything from you," she said quietly. Nathan looked at her, searching for something familiar, anything. "I came because you asked for closure." Her eyes held his. "And because I needed to make one decision." His chest tightened. "What decision?" Audrey glanced briefly toward the efficient, toward the guests, toward the version of a future that had been planned without her. Then she looked back at him. "I needed to decide," she said, "whether I would let this go or correct it." Nathan felt the weight of that settle in. Not anger, not revenge. Choice, and for the first time he realized she had all of it. The staff member's phone buzzed again. He looked down, then up. His voice was almost careful now. "Sir, we've received final instruction." Nathan didn't take his eyes off Audrey. "Say it," he said. The man swallowed, then spoke. "The ceremony authorization has been denied, pending direct approval from Ms. Audrey Whitmore Brooks." Silence. Nathan didn't look at anyone else, didn't need to, because the truth was already standing in front of him, not hidden anymore, not distant, right here and entirely out of his reach. Audrey didn't move, didn't smile, didn't gloat. She just stood there, composed, as the entire room waited for her next decision, and Nathan realized something that came too late. This was no longer about what he had lost. It was about what she would choose to do with the power he had handed back to her. And he had no control over that choice. The conference room overlooking the river had no audience. No murmurs, no judgment, just quiet. Audrey stood at the head of the table, a thin folder resting beneath her hand. The board members of Ashford Industrial Holdings sat across from her, composed, attentive, waiting, not for approval, for direction. William Kensington gave a subtle nod. "The final transfer documents have been fully executed. All controlling interests are now officially under your authority." Audrey didn't respond immediately. She looked down at the folder, then out toward the glass wall where the city stretched beyond. For years she had chosen a smaller life, a quieter one where love mattered more than power. Now power had found her anyway, not as something to prove, but something to protect. She opened the folder. "Let's begin," she said calmly. There was no hesitation in her voice now, no uncertainty, only clarity. The first decisions she made were not about expansion or profit. They were about structure, stability, accountability. She approved the internal review Margaret had quietly prepared years ago. She confirmed the leadership changes that had already been recommended, and then she paused on one final document, a proposal for a foundation. Margaret Ashford's name sat at the top. Audrey's fingers rested on it a moment longer than the others. Then she signed. "Launch it," she said. "Focus on long-term community development, housing, education, infrastructure. No publicity campaign. Let the work speak for itself." A few board members exchanged brief looks, then nodded. It wasn't a move for attention. It was a move for purpose, and that was when Audrey understood something Margaret had never needed to explain. Wealth wasn't power. Choice was. Nathan didn't see the inside of rooms like that anymore. His world had become smaller, quieter, measured. The job he held now wasn't prestigious. It paid enough, it demanded effort, it left no room for illusion. For the first time in years, people didn't treat him based on what they thought he had. They treated him based on what he did, and sometimes that was harder. Sabrina had left before the wedding fallout even settled. No arguments, no closure, just distance. The kind that made it clear she had never been there for anything real. Nathan didn't chase her. He didn't chase anything anymore. Some nights he sat alone, in his apartment, staring at nothing in particular, replaying conversations he couldn't fix, moments he had dismissed, words he couldn't take back. He had thought Audrey was ordinary. He had thought her silence meant weakness. What he hadn't understood was that she had been choosing restraint when she could have chosen power all along. And by the time he saw it, it was gone. Not taken from him, or lost. Months later, Audrey stood in a different place. Not a boardroom, not a ballroom. A quiet site just outside the city, where construction had just begun on the first project under the Margaret Ashford Foundation. There were no cameras. No speeches. Just the steady rhythm of work starting from the ground up. William stood a few steps behind her. "You could have done this differently," he said. "Public recognition, influence, visibility." Audrey shook her head slightly. "That was never the goal. She looked out at the framework rising slowly into shape. For the first time in a long while, she felt something settle inside her. Not victory, not revenge, peace. She hadn't corrected the past. She hadn't needed to. She had simply chosen what came next, and that was enough. She turned away from the sight, walking back toward her car, the future no longer something she had to prove, just something she would live. If Audrey had revealed her identity before the divorce, would Nathan have loved her or only her fortune? Let us know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories.